if you're in a place in your life where things do feel out of control, where you feel like you can't quite get a grip, where you feel less than, where you feel overwhelmed, maybe you can get a lot out of this book in a way that I just wasn't able to. Today we're going to talk about The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F*** by Mark Manson, and I am just going to go ahead and accept that this video is going to get demonetized. So the back copy says, in this generation-defining self-help guide, a superstar blogger shows us that the key to being stronger, happier people is to handle adversity better and stop trying to be positive all the time. For the past few years, Mark Manson, via his wildly popular blog, has been working on correcting our delusional expectations for ourselves and for the world. He now brings his hard-fought wisdom to this groundbreaking book. Manson makes the argument that human beings are flawed and limited. As he writes, not everybody can be extraordinary. There are winners and losers in society, and some of it is not fair or your fault. Manson advises us to get to know our limitations and accept them. This, he says, is the real source of empowerment. Once we embrace our fears, faults, and uncertainties, once we stop running from and avoiding and start confronting painful truths, we can begin to find the courage and confidence we desperately seek. In life, we have a limited amount of fucks to give, so you must choose your fucks wisely. Manson brings a much-needed, grab-you-by-the-shoulders-and-look-you-in-the-eyes moment of real talk, filled with entertaining stories and profane, ruthless humor. This manifesto is a refreshing slap in the face for all of us, so that we can start to lead more contented, grounded lives. Mark Manson is a star blogger with more than 2 million readers. He lives in New York City. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck is his first book, and it's published by Harper. It came out in 2016, so it's been around for a while, but for some reason is making a sudden resurgence. Before we get started, I think it's fair to disclose that I did not buy this book for myself. It was given to me by someone close to me who lives in constant chaos. They had just bought a copy for themselves. They heard it was really good, and they bought a few extra copies to share with their loved ones without having read it. So it didn't even, I don't even want to say it came recommended so much as I'm about to have the experience of reading this book. I would like for you to have it too. And I think that the way that you go into something like a self-help book matters on how you take in and digest the information. I think if I was in a different place, I think if this was 15 or 20 years ago, when my life was more chaotic, when I was a little less tethered, when the ground felt shakier beneath my feet, I think I would have gotten a different experience out of reading this than I got. So I just wanted to make sure that I put that in the front part, so if you hear me down talking the book later or saying that things are really obvious, some of that's just because of life experience that I've had between now and then, and were I younger or in a different place in life, I might get more out of it than I actually did. Before we get going, I do have to do the YouTube thing and ask you to like the video and subscribe if you find it helpful and you like the way that I present information. As a smaller creator, every time somebody pushes one of those buttons, it really helps me out, so thank you for taking the time. The book starts out by telling us the story of Charles Bukowski, who is a lech and a drunk and is working at a dead-end job in a post office. And he comes home at night after this job that he hates, and he sits down at his typewriter, and he hammers out poetry while he drinks himself into oblivion, while he drinks himself unconscious. After 30 years of fruitless effort and constant self-sabotage, Bukowski finally gets a break. So he quits his job at the post office, which he hates, and he throws himself into his writing. And he says basically, I'm either going to make it or I'm going to starve. So Mark Manson would have you get out of that story that the reason Bukowski succeeded was because he gave up, because he stopped trying, because he looked at himself, examined himself critically, accepted the fact that he was a spectacular failure, and leaned into it. And that pretty much sums up my entire problem with this book. For 30 years, this man tried and failed and tried again. 30 years he honed his craft. 30 years he came home every day and sat down at a typewriter and hammered words out. Good, bad, whatever. Now, a lot could be said for how he went about it. You might say that perhaps he would have found success earlier had he not been sabotaging his progress with drink and woman and, intentional misery. Or perhaps you might say that all of that misery and suffering was necessary in order for him to really get to the core of it and really express himself. You might say either of those things. The point of the fact is we don't know. The point of the fact is this man worked for 30 years perfecting and honing his craft. And that is why he succeeded. Not because he gave up, but because he never gave up, because he didn't stop. 30 years of working on something and then finally succeeding is not an accident. That's not luck. That's not giving up and stumbling into it. That is sheer dogged determination. That is unrelenting pursuit of a dream, even in the face of terrible adversity. That's grabbing hold of a thing and refusing to let go until it finally gives in because you're not going to. And somehow this guy who's writing this self-help book, who's trying to give you this life advice, this sage wisdom, has missed that point or completely glossed over it. And I found it really difficult to take anything he said after that point seriously, which is kind of a shame because it's the opening of the book. Mark Manson comes across as a sort of stoner philosopher. When you and all of your buddies are sort of diving into illicit substances or alcohol in your misspent youth, and your buddy Joe thinks he's stumbled on the secrets of the universe and unlocked these cosmic secrets, and you, in your drug-addled drunken stupor, agree with him, or at least you think you do. Only you can't quite grasp the concepts entirely because you're not sober, and your buddy can't quite articulate the concepts entirely because he's completely blasted, and so all the two of you can say is like, whoa, and holy shit. In reality, you've both just spent the last hour flossing your noses with a spaghetti noodle and trying to make out the meaning behind the pattern in your mom's 1970s wallpaper. That's not to say that this book does not have a few good points. It does. It's just that other people have made those points better in more critically thought out ways and articulated their thoughts more thoroughly and more intelligently in other works. So I'm sitting there having a rant at my husband about how reading this book was a complete waste of my time, and that's when it hit me. I am too old for this book, or I've had too much life experience and I have already worked through or worked out all of the problems that this book is trying to help you resolve. It's aimed at people in their 20s and maybe their early 30s who are still struggling with things like controlling their temper or dealing with bad breakups in a way that makes their world feel like it's completely shattered, or dealing with family who they feel like is taking advantage of them and they don't really know how to tell them to go away or to put distance between them or to set up boundaries and hold to them. And those are things that I've worked through, that I had worked through 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Had I read this book in my early 20s, I probably would have gotten a lot out of it. Mark Manson is only 2 years younger than me, but he is a lot more plugged in to young people than I am. I am an old 40-year-old woman, but Mark Manson is a young 38. He and I have been on relatively similar paths, his commercial success aside. We both had roughly similar times growing up based on the way he described them. We've both done a lot of world traveling and gotten a lot out of it, and also sort of realized that at a certain point you stop getting benefit out of that, or it has diminishing returns. And at some point you just want to kind of go home and set down roots. The difference is he is capable of discussing those experiences with younger people in a way that doesn't feel condescending, in a way that doesn't feel like he's talking down to them or like he's judging them or dismissing them for not having all of that life experience. And that's something that I struggle with. I am not good at relating to young people. I've moved past that point in my life and sort of discarded it, like I got what I needed out of it and now I've set it aside. And trying to go back there mentally or emotionally is really difficult for me. It's not hard for him. he's able to tap into that part of himself and really relate to people who are still going through all of that. So maybe that's the real takeaway from this book. Maybe if you're in a place in your life where things do feel out of control, where you feel like you can't quite get a grip, where you feel less than, where you feel overwhelmed, maybe you can get a lot out of this book in a way that I just wasn't able to. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. And of course, if you like the way that I present information, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell down below. You can find all of my social media contacts in the description. And of course, if you want to keep up with me and the progress I'm making on my current novel, you can do that at effywritesbooks.com. Thank you so much for watching. Have an excellent day, and I'll see you next time.